Worldwide, faith-based, community-driven streaming media. This is The Voice 17104.com from the Allison Hill District of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Now broadcasting community radio from Studio A and community television from Studio B on The Voice 17104.com.
Welcome, my brothers and sisters, to the Richard James Show on 17104, The Voice. Hello, my friends. Another day, another week, another challenge. I'm happy to have you to tune in to the Richard James Show, and I have an added pleasure today. One of my favorite people in the world, someone I've known for quite some years. I want to introduce you to my daughter, Sera James, who is the Associate Director of the Women's History Graduate Program at Sarah Lawrence College. Welcome, Tara.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, it is truly, truly a blessing, and I am tickled to death that you're here, because I know you have a lot to contribute, and you already have contributed a lot to others. And you do that, and you do that very, very often. I'm going to start out by reading a poem, and then I'm going to have Tara to give us a little bit of her history and her journey in this thing called life. The poem that I'm going to read right now is called The Woman. She cared enough to face those racks of pain that test the heart and drive most men insane. With pride and strength, she works from dawn to dusk. With aching hands, she never cries or fuss. A simple smile, a tear, and love's embrace. Fate unveils pain upon her face. She will not reach except to lend a hand. She does not long for heaven's promised land. Instead, she faces each day with a faint smile and to the world declare, it's all worthwhile. A braver woman I've never ever seen, to live a life in pain and not be mean. I must believe that God is on her side. I think of her with love and glowing pride. And when that day arrives, and one must die, there'll be no deep regrets to make her cry. She'll wear a smile upon her lovely face and say, so long to all the human race. Right. Thank you so much, Tara, for being here. You have always had a commitment to others, a commitment to people. You always had a love for history. Tell us something about your journey, your education, your commitment to equality, especially for women.
Well, I grew up, as you know, with stories of the civil rights movement from both you and my mother. And so I had always been interested in the civil rights movement and in activism in particular. I took a little detour and got interested in theater and got back interested in history and decided to major in history in college. So I went to Temple University, and then I actually went to Sarah Lawrence through the Women's History Graduate Program, and then started working there after I graduated.
You said it so smoothly and easily. Not many people graduate from a program and then turn around and in 2 years become associate director of that same program they graduated from. I think that's quite an accomplishment. And because I would also know you did quite well in at Temple University. Your mother attended Temple for a while. I think she got her undergraduate degree from Penn State and a graduate degree from Delaware State. So you made quite some accomplishment in terms of history. Tell me, why women's history? What draws you and interests you in women's history as such?
I was really interested in the history of Black women, and I wanted to go someplace where I could study about Black women. at Temple at the time, they weren't really open to my studying about Black women and feminism or womanism. Um, and at Sarah Lawrence, they were open to that. It was more, um, you were able to do what you wanted to do. It was a flexible program and I could study what I wanted to and I wasn't sort of put down because of what I believed in. So I decided to go to Sarah Lawrence.
You made quite an impression on Sarah Lawrence as a student to come back in a couple of years and become assistant director of the program. How did that come about?
You know, I'm not sure. I went away and I graduated and I started working in admissions at a college near Philadelphia. And the person who was in the job I'm in now went to go get her PhD. And so they asked me if I would step in.
Wow, that's fantastic. You brought along some videos of some women who have accomplished a great deal for us, and might be termed unsung heroes. It's quite often, and the civil rights movement is no different. Women who are involved in the movement or in education or in government are often overlooked in terms of when it comes to recognition for the things they have accomplished. Can you tell us something, give us a little overview of the three women who we're going to review and look at today?
Okay, the three women are Ella Baker. Ella Baker they actually all sort of intertwined and worked together and also worked in their separate locations and separate movements.
Right.
Ella Baker was one of the elders of the movement. She had worked in NAACP, and then she came to work with Martin Luther King in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And she didn't quite like the methods or the ideology of King and the pastors he was working with. She didn't believe in charismatic leadership. She believed in grassroots, decentralized leadership.
Right.
And so this was around the time of the sit-ins in North Carolina. And King and NAACP wanted to bring in the youth to their older established organizations. She didn't want them under them. She wanted them to be able to work on their own. So she encouraged them to form their own organization, and SNCC, which is the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, was that organization. And so Diane Nash was one of those students who co-founded that with Ella Baker. Gloria Richardson was actually also one of, not elder, but she was one of the older activists who was drawn into the Cambridge movement by her daughter. And she ended up leading the Cambridge movement in Maryland. But she also worked with Ella Baker and Diane Nash and SNCC.
Let me just throw this in, because I consider Gloria Richardson one of my mentors. Gloria Richardson also, when she was heading up the civil rights struggle in Maryland, also came to Chester, Pennsylvania, and helped to lead the demonstration and organize the protest. We went to jail together. But she was a brilliant woman, and I think that sometimes these women are just overlooked and not given the credit for what they were, because if it was without these women, these three women, for exactly, history would have been different, been very, 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 very different. And I understand there was some controversy at the March on Washington, where they had to fight to get some women to be able to have the ability to speak. You know anything about that?
Right. There were a few women who wanted to speak and who people thought should speak, and they wanted only the male leadership to be out front. And so they had to take the back. There was one, there was one woman who got to, and I forget who that is.
That wasn't Nash?
No, it wasn't Diane Nash. It wasn't Gloria Richardson.
Okay, I know
it was Dorothy Height.
Speak. I can't remember who it was.
But yeah, there was only one woman who was allowed to speak.
That's right, and a whole herd of men. And that was the problem. When you look at each location in terms of the movement, the organization and putting together these mass demonstrations and the structure to the movement was done by women. But yet, when it comes to stepping in front of the cameras and getting the glory, that was the men. Really, 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 I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Also, Terry, I don't know if you heard about an organization, a group called the Young Turks. But the Young Turks were a group of NAACP Youth Council members who went up against the elders because they were a lot more dynamic, a lot more interested in getting things done. Now, in Chester, Pennsylvania, we had a very, very active youth council. We had a woman by the name of Alfreda Charlton Reed, who led and really actually started the whole movement in the city of Chester. But when you read history, even history written by SDS and by others, she's not mentioned very, very, very much. And it's the story over and over and over and over again, where women are not given equal rights or equal, shall we say, notice or credit for what they've done. Now, understand, Terry, you guys have a women's conference, a women's history conference. You have every year. You still having those?
We try.
About some of the topics and some of the purpose of those conferences.
Right. We've done women celebrating women in the civil rights movement. The conference always centers around women and activism of some kind. So we've done women in Muslim movement. We've done women in indigenous movements. We've done women working in the community. We've done women, art, and activism. We've done women and the body, where we looked at people who are disabled or fat bodies, and we looked at how gender shapes the perceptions of women in the body. We've done it's about 20, I think. No, we're over 20 now, about 21 years. The last 2 years have been hard because for one reason or other, we've had to cancel.
Oh.
But I mean to have a Women's History Conference online this year.
Fantastic. Susan Anthony, I understand one of the leaders of the feminist movement. Mm-hmm. And when was it? Was it 1920 when women received the right to vote?
Right. It's the 100th year anniversary.
Excuse me?
The 100th anniversary, 100-year anniversary.
Right. 1920.
Or some women's right to vote.
How much did Susan Anthony and her crowd recognize, respect, and include African American women?
It was off and on. They were actually pretty racist. Susan B. Anthony worked with Elizabeth Cady Stanton, working for suffrage, but they excluded Black women in a lot of their activism because for what they called expediency, meaning they wanted the support of Southern women, and Southern women weren't going to work with African American women. And so a lot of times they excluded Black women who had their own movement for suffrage.
Right. Amazing. When I think about that, the one woman that comes to mind to me was Harriet Tubman. You must say that if it wasn't for the existence of a Harriet Tubman, we don't know how the Civil War would have went. They mention her name, but they don't mention all the things that she accomplished. She's just one of them. Oh, there's a thousand of Mary McLeod, but there's 1,000 women of color that have contributed. But we also have to deal with the element of racism. Racism along with sexism, in order to bring about some changes. We got some videos here, and the first video is it Ella Baker, the first one?
Ella Baker, yes.
Can you kind of do an introduction of who Ella Baker is and what she accomplished? Then we can look at it and then we can talk about it.
Okay, Ella Baker was one of the elders of the movement. She was the person, as I said, who believed in decentralized leadership. She didn't believe in a charismatic leader because she believed that what she said was about Martin Luther King. She said, um, King didn't build the movement built King.
Oh, beautiful.
And so she was really instrumental in forming organizations um, to fight for civil rights and making sure that those organizations were led by a group of people and not just one charismatic person.
Boy,
So I think the clip is later on in the mid 70s, in 1974, when she was talking about her activism and her beliefs.
all right, well, let's take a look at the video and then we'll talk a little bit more about Ella.
Friends, brothers, and sisters in the struggle for human dignity and freedom, I am here to represent the struggle that has gone on for 300 or more years, a struggle to be recognized as citizens in a country in which we were born. I have had about 40 or 50 years of struggle, ever since a little boy on the streets of Norfolk called me a nigger. I struck him back, and then I had to learn that hitting back with my fist one individual was not enough. It takes organization. It takes dedication. It takes the willingness to stand by and do what has to be done when it has to be done. A nice gathering like today is not enough. You have to go back and reach out to your neighbors who don't speak to you. And you have to reach out to your friends who think they are making it good and get them to understand that they, as well as you and I, cannot be free in America or anywhere else where there is capitalism and imperialism until we can get people to recognize that they themselves have to make the struggle and have to make the fight for freedom every day in the year, every year, until they win it. Thank you.
Wow. What a dynamic woman.
She's one of my favorites.
I mean, she sends chills down my spine. She is very, very, very dynamic. And some of the things, I could see why they would be afraid of her. She speaks beyond just the women's movement, but she talks about the whole element of imperialism and capitalism and how that has affected its economic system, which is place property value on women. They think of women as being their property. Or think of ownership. Wow. What's your thoughts there? I'm just to look at her saying it and speaking.
Right. I like that she was not someone who was afraid of anyone, and if she was afraid, she didn't show it. She was not intimidated. A lot of people could have been intimidated by King and the other people that she worked with. She had her beliefs, and she was not going to let anybody get in the way of that. And she had a specific kind of activism that she thought would work, and she worked toward those goals.
Now, was she directly involved in SNCC?
Yeah, she was one of the founders.
One of the founders of SNCC.
If I remember correctly, if I remember my history correctly, she was actually asked by the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and King to organize young people. So she held a conference at Shaw University for
Okay.
young activists. And she encouraged them, rather than joining the SCLC or NAACP, to form their own organization. And then she ended up leaving SCLC to work with them. And she also was one of the organizers of the Freedom Democratic Party in Mississippi.
Oh, okay. The Freedom Democratic Party. And a lot of people just don't know who she is. I think that's absolutely disgraceful.
She was not one of the people who wanted to be out front.
So,
She believed in organizing people. She did not feel like she needed to be out there making the speeches. And I feel a lot of women.
and I agree with her. I studied community organization under Saul Alinsky. And one of the theories is that you should organize folks and then step back and allow them to be able to do their thing and be able to, and that your name didn't have to be the center of it. But still, we need to know who did what, respect that, love them, lift them up. And it seemed to me to be a pattern, not just with Ella Baker, but a pattern that occurs in America, in our churches, in our institutions, where we see as women as backup. But I'm noticing nowadays that, hey, women are stepping forward, particularly in the political arena. When I see the mayor of Atlanta, for example, the mayor of Washington, D.C., for example, these women are doing it. And also, what's his name? The former representative from Baltimore, his wife is running for Congress. But we need to me, I see the relationship between man and woman as being a partnership, as opposed to one dominating over the other. How supportive? This is a really interesting question. How supportive is the public for a women's history graduate program? Is it financed? Is it up there? People realize how critical it is.
I don't think. I mean, we have a pretty small program. We have a pretty small program, but we have a passionate program. So the students who come, who study with us, have a passion not only for women's history, because that's not all that we do. We do women's and gender history, but our students go on to not only be historians, but they go on to be activists. A lot of them work for nonprofits or become teachers. So they use women's history as a foundation for what they want to do.
I see. So that gives them a start.
Right.
Start to go in the direction that they want to go in. And you said they use gender history.
Mm-hmm. So it's not only women. It's women. We've had men come in and study masculinity. We have non-binary, gender non-binary people come in and study that history. It encompasses a whole lot of complex.
I see. And do you teach some classes, Tara?
Not anymore. I used to, but now I mostly do registrations. I organize all of the events. I advise students. I don't teach as much as I used to.
Oh, okay. But what were the classes that you taught in the class?
Writing. Our students write master's theses. So I took students through that whole process of writing master's theses.
Wow. Wow, that's wonderful. That's fantastic. That is great. Okay, we got, who's next? What next video do we have? Is that Nash? What's her name?
Her name is Diane Nash.
Can you just do a little small intro for Diane Nash? Tell us who she is.
Diane Nash was an activist who was one of the leaders of the Nashville movement. She was actually from the North. She was from Chicago.
Okay.
Started to go to Howard University and then transferred to Fisk in Nashville and experienced a racism she had never experienced in her life when she got that part of the South. And
Yeah.
so she decided that she wanted to become an activist. She wanted to fight what was going on in Nashville, and she joined, she was one of the organizers of SNCC. And so she led the sit-ins in Nashville, and then she was one of the organizers of the Freedom Light.
Okay, so she was one of the organizers of SNCC also, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
Right.
Fantastic. Okay, well, let's take a look at it. See what we think. Nash.
Today, Diane Nash joins us after a short drive from her native Chicago. But the longer journey that brought her here began over 60 years ago. It's taken her on foot, by bus, via picket line, and jail cell. As a young woman, she grew up in Chicago's South Side and experienced racial prejudice, but knew of segregation mostly through stories and news reports. Then in 1959, she enrolled at Fisk University in Nashville and felt the humiliation of overt segregation everywhere she looked.
When I actually went south and actually saw signs that said white and colored, and I actually could not drink out of that water fountain or go to that ladies' room, I had a real emotional reaction.
She co-founded the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and soon became chair of Nashville's sit-in movement.
And we would practice things such as how to protect your head from a beating, how to protect each other. If one person was taking a severe beating, we would practice other people putting their bodies in between that person and the violence so that the violence could be more distributed.
On the front lines of lunch counter sit-ins, she was arrested numerous times. When 2,500 protesters marched in Nashville City Hall and challenged Mayor Ben West, it was the young Diane Nash who made headlines by asking him point blank if he felt discrimination was wrong.
I tried as best I could to answer it, frankly and honestly, that I could not agree that it was morally right for someone to sell them merchandise and refuse them service. And I had to answer it just exactly that way.
3 weeks after Nash's very public conversation with the mayor, the first black customers were served at counters in Nashville. In 1961, she went on to lead groups of freedom riders. They protested the unlawful segregation of blacks and whites on interstate buses. Police often arrested the riders, but they also allowed white mobs to attack them first without intervening. To become a freedom rider wasn't for the faint of heart. When U.S. Attorney General Robert Kennedy wanted Nash to stop the riders, his assistant was simply no match for her courage and conviction.
Phone the hotel room rings, and it's the Attorney General. And he opens the conversation. Who the hell is Diane Nash? Call her and let her know what is waiting for the Freedom Riders. I called her. I said, I understand that there are more Freedom Riders coming down from Nashville. You must stop them if you can. Her response was, they're not going to turn back. Soon I was shouting, young woman, do you understand you're going to get somebody killed? She said, sir, you should know. We all signed our last wills and testaments last night before they left. We know, but we cannot let violence overcome nonviolence.
Not long after, President John F. Kennedy appointed Nash to a national committee that led to the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Today, she is still an active civil rights advocate and has received the Rosa Parks Award, the Distinguished American Award, the LBJ Award for Leadership, the Freedom Award, and honorary doctorates from Fisk University and the University of Notre Dame.
She must have been quite a woman. That is absolutely wonderful. What are your thoughts, Tara, on Ms. Nash?
She's very dynamic, very intelligent, and very courageous. One of the videos that I didn't give you, she talks about fear.
Yeah.
Talks about hearing racists talk about what they're going to do to her if they get a hold of her. and she heard them, and she said she got scared for a minute, and she said she was going to let herself feel that fear, but if she still felt it after a certain point, she was going to resign.
Suicide. He said
she ended up sticking with it, and she went on those freedom rides, and she went to jail. She went to jail 6 months pregnant, refused bail. She and her fellow activists came up with jail, no bail. They were going to stay in jail, and I just I admire her courage.
Wow.
And her ability to speak truth to power.
Truth to power. I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, our time is sort of limited, and we have a couple of more videos. Thank you for Nash and letting us know exactly who she is and who are some of these great women who fought for equality. But the next one, I think, is an introduction of Gloria Richardson. And I'll hold my comments until after. I want to hear that introduction. Right, we'll roll it.
Ain't gonna let nobody.
Born Gloria St. Clair Hayes in Baltimore, Maryland on May 22nd, 1922, she moved to Cambridge, Maryland in 1931 with her parents. She gained an appreciation for politics from her grandfather, who was the first African-American city councilman in Cambridge. In the fall of 1938, she attended Howard University, where she studied sociology. During her college years, Gloria participated in demonstrations against racial discrimination. After graduating, she returned to Cambridge, where she married Harry Richardson. Although college educated, Richardson was unable to gain employment as a social worker in the town because of racial discrimination. It's been said a little child shall lead them. Motivated by her daughter Donna's participation with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, known as SNCC, Richardson agreed to lead the Cambridge Nonviolent Action Committee, known as CNAC. This fearless leader applied some of her grandfather's philosophies and techniques to the organization, believing it is the responsibility of blacks to give back to their communities. She created a network of officers and board members with the residents of the Second Ward. In 1962, Gloria Richardson led a civil rights movement unlike any movement during that era. CNAC shined a light on the disparities in the African American community. The activists recognized the full picture. It was more than racial segregation that separated the African Americans from the larger white community. She understood inhabitable housing, employment discrimination, and poor health care were the source of frustration in the African American community. Her vision and tenacity inspired and motivated young people in the Second Ward to march and protest for equality. Taking criticism from both sides, they wouldn't back down or be turned away. The CNAC refused to accommodate federal and local officials by suspending protests in exchange for their pledge to amend the town. Richardson's resilience and determination helped forge relationships with the important people who helped facilitate change that was desperately needed. After 9 hours, Richardson negotiated an agreement with the federal government unlike any movement before. In the past, the Kennedy administration was able to settle unrest with the promise of change. The Treaty of Cambridge was different. The agreement met most of the demands made by CNAC to help end segregation, housing, and unemployment issues. The agreement went beyond promises and proposals. It committed the federal government to promoting racial reform on a larger scale than ever before. The reform was the beginning of a change in the community. It brought a sense of normalcy back to the town. And CNAC kept up their end of the agreement and ceased demonstrations. Richardson resigned from CNAC during the summer of 1964. We honor and celebrate the courageous leadership and commitment of Gloria Richardson Dandridge during the civil rights movement of the 1960s. During a time of racial segregation, Gloria became one of the strongest advocates for economic rights as well as desegregation. Eastern Shore Network for Change, and our strategic partners for Reflections on Pine, the City of Cambridge, Dorchester County, and the State of Maryland is proud to join in honoring Gloria Richardson Dandridge for her contributions in the fight to achieve racial equality during a defining era of our nation's struggle for civil rights for all.
Ain't gonna let nobody, Lordy, turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody, Lordy, turn me round. Keep on walking, yeah, keep on talking, Lordy, marching up the freedom land. Ain't gonna let segregation, Lordy, turn me round, turn me round.
Your thoughts, Carol, about Gloria Richardson and her participation?
Gloria Richardson was one of the few who were actually was one of the faces of the movement in Cambridge. She was out in front. She was not behind the scenes. And she was one of the charismatic leaders. The interesting thing about the Treaty of Cambridge that they talked about was that the local leadership, local government decided that they wanted to take those changes that they talked about and put them up for referendum so that everyone would have to vote on it, including the racist whites. And so Gloria Richardson actually decided that they should boycott the Treaty of Cambridge and boycott the referendum because she didn't believe that anybody should have the right to vote about rights that they shouldn't even have to ask for. And it turned out, eventually they got their rights.
Well, let me just say something about Gloria Richardson. I met Gloria Richardson back in the early 60s when we started the mass demonstrations in Chester, Pennsylvania. Chester was a hub of the civil rights movement. Gloria came down with her entourage and helped us to organize ourselves. I participated in freedom rides with Gloria during those particular times. So did your mother, so did your grandfather and your grandmother. All participated, and your Uncle Curtis. We as our families were heavily involved in the civil rights struggle, and Gloria was right there. She helped us to get ourselves together. I remember they took us, we had a sit-in in the middle of Chester on Edgemont Avenue, and they came and arrested all, and they arrested Gloria, and we were in jail for a couple of weeks. But I consider her a mentor. If she's still alive, Tara.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Is Gloria still alive?
Yes, she is.
Oh, thank God. She's got to be up in the 90s.
Yeah, late 90s, I believe.
Yes, she's 22nd. She's got to be in the late 90s. But thank God for her, and thank God for you, and people who keep hope alive and keep their images alive, and we'll be able to know something about them. And writing our own history is another topic to get in touch with. But these great women, we talk about Rosa Parks, who sit in the bus and started in Montgomery, Alabama. I raise up Rosa, but I raise up Gloria. Gloria led the movement. You know, they were under assault and attack in Maryland when she was leading that movement. They had a lot of attacks from racist white.
She talked about the fact that she was part of a nonviolent movement. CNAC was nonviolent, but it was a tactic. And so what she said was during the day, they would do these nonviolent activism events. And then she said during the night, the men would come out and sit out on porches with their guns, waiting for racist whites who would then want to come into the Black neighborhoods and start killing people.
And that's a fact. There was an organization in Louisiana called the Deacons for Defense and Justice. They had the same kind of organization in Maryland, led by Gloria Richardson. They were nonviolent, but they preserved the right of self-protection.
Right.
And they protected their communities. And we did the same thing in Chester. We protected our communities because these folks were wanted to take our lives. But her leadership was, I just can't tell you how she galvanized and brought people together. And I'm just so happy you raised her up. You invited her to one of your conferences, and I was there. And I got an opportunity to hear her speak again after so many years. And I just want to thank you for doing things like that and continue to do things like that. We're moving right along. We have a video of her, is it an interview, Tara, or is it?
This is an interview that happened, I think it was 2017, so it's fairly recent, where she just talks about some of the things they did in that movement in Cambridge.
Well, we can't hear the whole thing. I understand it's pretty long, but let's see if we can, how much we can get in to hear that. Okay? All right.
I can't remember. I don't think we talked about racism and stuff in my house. I know my family knew about it. And in the second ward, I do know that I knew where I wasn't supposed to cross on Ray Street and where I wasn't supposed to go in the stores. But that became almost like, well, that's what your life is like. Until we got to the 60s.
So tell me about that. Like, let's go back to 1961 when the Freedom
Oh, yes, when the
Yeah.
Well, they had been, my father had died. I was running the drugstore. And there was all this stuff going on Route 40. I was working from, I guess, 9 o'clock in the morning to 12 o'clock at night because we had ice cream bars beside the pharmacy part and patent medicines and things. So I just vaguely knew about, and did not think if they would ever come to Cambridge. But my uncle was a bail bondsman and his son. And when they went through the Route 40 stuff and the Civic Interest Group, which was also a SNCC project, when they went through there, the governor was going home, and they were after him, and his home was further down on the eastern shore from Annapolis. And so the people got on the buses and then contacted my uncle to as they went down, they went into Salisbury. Salisbury opened up its doors. As they went down, in each of the larger cities on the eastern shore caved. So when they got to Chrisfield and arrested them, my uncle bailed them out. And on the way back, for them to go back to Baltimore, my cousin said to them, well, if you all really want to attack them, you need to come to Cambridge, Maryland.
Oh, so that's how it happened.
So that's how they got there. So there were two SNCC field secretaries. At that time, they were doing one in a pair, one black, one white. And they stopped off there. And in the beginning, because SNCC was so involved in voter registration and that kind of thing, they were going for voter registration, but people in the second ward had been voting, and they had a high participation rate.
Yes, they did.
And so I was going back and forth, and they were having a demonstration. Oh, I forgot one thing.
Okay.
They had one big meeting, and that's when, because everybody was very calm in Cambridge in terms of the black community. And they had one of the churches had this big rally. And I guess about 400 or 500 people went out to the rally.
What
These
church was
people
that?
I had never heard say a word, even in the drugstore, about segregation, anything, but they all out there at that church. And so then people realized that there was a underlying problem there. And it was really those people, older people in the churches and in the community in general, that first formed a kind of advisory committee. People that never talked to me, scholars supposedly, always like to say that I appointed somebody from the welfare roles on there. But I didn't appoint anybody. They were part of that group that went out to the church and began to form. And then at that point, we thought only the high school kids could demonstrate anything. So they just backed them. But a lot of the beginning policy came from that first group of people, and they backed the youngsters, which were 16, 15, 13. We had that were in jail. We had, people there. People today think everybody was adult. SNCC was always very young people, and in fact, once the kids had gotten the town almost shut down, then the ministers fled. They went over and they were going downtown making deals. So then the kids got very depressed, and their parents got together and raised money and sent me and my cousin down to Atlanta office to see if we could have, because we were adults, if we could, take over. And they said yes. So we were the first adult group that SNCC had. And we came back and began to move forward. But the children had dropped out. And so after about 3 or 4 months, but maybe mid-62, they started coming back because they were very disappointed. They'd gone out, they'd gone to jail, had done everything. And here were people making deals based on their being quiet, and we'll discuss it, that kind of.
Right.
So we went down and came back because we also needed some technical assistance. But after that, I don't know why I thought that we weren't really that concerned about going into the soda fountains and places. So we did a survey. I made a survey, and the young grammar school kids took that around on weekends. And we asked people, what about their housing? Did they have plumbing? Did they have this, did that? How did they rank? Did they want to go into the 10-cent Woolworths fountain or what? So that public accommodations came down the bottom of the list. Was housing, desegregation of schools, all the things that we did in the agreement, really. And there were some students coming in, white students coming in from Swarthmore College. They took the survey cards back, and the professors up there did the correlations on that and came back and gave us the numbers. So actually, when we made the agreement with Robert Kennedy, we had given him that survey, and it was totally apart from the census. We had a 9% unemployment rate generally in Cambridge, but for the black community, it was something like 70%.
Did you say 70?
Yes, 70. So what had happened with that is that when the Phillips Packing Company and black folks only had mainly jobs that were laboring jobs in the factory. But when that closed down, they didn't have anything. A lot of people had had been able to get themselves together and buy homes and stuff. But that whole packing company collapsing, so they couldn't even go and do the jobs of canning stuff and picking the vegetables and the oyster things. So it got, of course, worse.
Right. Do you think that marked the beginning of another decline? That the Phillips collapse kind of started the second decline?
Yeah, well, during those 3 years, nothing really happened. They were businesses that came in air packs, and when they came into the community, and they would come out to the meetings and pretend they were going to do whatever. In the meantime, the aristocrats in Cambridge that had helped put it together, as well as the state of Maryland, began paying people down out the county to come in and fight. And in that, and the Cambridge Nonviolent Action Committee had two things going. One, in the daytime, we ran legal demonstrations and picketing following the law, whether they arrested us or not. At night, when people came out to shoot and
light Molotov cocktails in the black community. Then a second group formed. And they were men there that had been in World War I and II. And so they got, and they were hunters, because the whole Eastern Shore, people hunt.
Everybody hunts, right.
So they formed a second group, and there was kind of a, well, I think people outside of Cambridge were very disturbed. But for those there, for us, it was, they would send somebody and say, well, how are the negotiations going on now? And whether we said yes or no. They would protect the community. I think the first thing we had, in the end, they were 9 white folks shot and no blacks.
Oh, so, I did not know that.
Oh, yes, no, that was true. So I don't know what they thought was going to happen when they started. And then black men were really upset because they had grown up sometimes playing ball with these people, and even though the schools were segregating, but they'd have relationships at work, and occasionally somebody white would come out and go attend their weddings or whatever. So they, I guess, also were hurt at a certain level. And also they weren't going to let anybody come in and shoot up that community. And so even when we did as they say, the treaty for Cambridge at the Department of Justice, the federal government had to send people. They had people all up the highway out here, probably every mile and a half, that they would pass us off in the car because the people in Cambridge on the committee were going up there. People, I think that maybe I just did the whole negotiation myself, but that was not true.
Who else was there?
The people on the executive committee of CNAC. Okay. So they all went up there. We were going back and forth before that day when they said that we had made the arrangements with Robert Kennedy. I think with him, when we went up there the first time, I thought he was a janitor because I'm expecting this attorney general dressed up in a suit and tie, and he had on like khaki pants and not a t-shirt but a regular shirt, and I was getting ready to just pass him on by, smile and pass him on by. When all of a sudden I looked at it, I thought, is that Kennedy? And so it proved it was. But I think the thing that really got him involved, I told him, they're treating us just like they treated you all when you were Irish and came into this country. And he stopped. And then we gave him the census report, and it went on from there. But we thought that he would be the proper person because when his brother was running for president, they said he could really get nasty and twist people around.
All right. This was a much longer interview, and we don't have the time. We're getting right down to the end of the show. Tara, your thoughts on the video on Ms. Richardson?
I have so many thoughts about that video. One of the things I was thinking was that Gloria Richardson and really the rest of the women that we're talking about were really strategic planners. So you have to be more than courageous. You have to be more than somebody who could face danger. You have to be a strategic and long-range planner.
Right.
You know how to get your goal. And she was very strategic in what she did.
One of the amazing things is that she's got to be in her upper 90s. I don't know exactly what, 98, 99.
98,
what is it?
She's 98.
98, and she just is lucid. Her memory is very, very clear. And I guess what touches me, Charlie, is that I was involved in some of that stuff. Because I'm getting up there close to 80. And I'm just happy that my daughter is leading the way in terms of education and involved in a program as mentoring and giving positivity to young women in particular, to help them to feel good about themselves and good about what they can do with their lives, and helping them to hone the skills to do it, and at a graduate level. So I want to say thank you very much.
Thank you.
Passing the torch along to you to continue to do the kinds of things that your family tried to do at our mediocre, my small level. I think it's been great, and this is the first time you and I have ever done anything like this. That's so, and I'm tickled to death because a lot of good information is going out there that people can use. Do you have any parting words that you would like to say about this whole situation of equality for women? Is there anything you'd like to say at this point, near the end?
Point out that the women that we talked about today are the foremothers of the women who were out on the streets today. It was 3 women who organized, who developed Black Lives Matter, and they are the daughters of the women that we were talking about today.
And those women have not gotten the recognition that they deserve. And I'm happy that those videos were made, and I'm happy of the fact that we're able to put it out there. I'm hoping that someone is writing this history and putting it down on paper, because if you don't write your own history, it may not be written at all. And putting together a record of what they did that could be passed along to posterity, and that's a good thing about the whole graduate program at Sera Lawrence, because not all schools have. I mean, are there many schools that have a graduate women's history program in this country?
No, we were the first women's history program in the country, and we're still one of the only.
Wow. And that says a lot about Sera Lawrence, and it says a lot about my daughter. That's fantastic, to be a pioneer, to lead the way, to educate folks, and to create recognition, and also just to write a record where it can move forward with other young women and young men, because our young men need to understand and respect women, because there's some things that are embedded. Some of these sexist things, the things that, the man got to be head of the household. I mean, there are things that rather than the person who really has the leadership talent and ability. So thank God for you, and continue to do what you're doing. And let me just say in closing to my audience for the Richard James Show, we appreciate you. We appreciate you tuning in. And we know that this show is heard in different parts of the world, World Wide Web. And what you've seen today is the kind of things that we do here in terms of pushing knowledge, in terms of a commitment to people of all races. We are particularly concerned now about our own African-American community. We are really, really concerned, and we're happy to do it. And I always like to thank the father of 17104, Mr. Christopher Thomas, and his lovely wife. Thank you, sir. For creating an opportunity where we can do this. And this is not a local show. Some folks are listening to this in California. Maria, your youngest sister, said her husband has relatives that watches the show in Africa. Wow. So this show is out there. So I'm going to say to all of you, and also I want to mention again that I still have my business, my little small business, African Paradise, and we're selling African clothing, African oils, a number of things. We're down in Lebanon on 82nd Street in the Lebanon Valley Farmers Market. So don't forget we out there. We need your support. And Tara, thank you. Thank you so much. And give my love to Jeremiah, my grandson. And thank y'all both. And he was been great since you've been doing this. He hasn't been an issue at all. Thanks again, and I'll be in touch.
Okay. All right.
All right. Take care now. Welcome, my brothers and sisters, to the Richard J. Show on Southern King 104, The Voice.